Glad we get to be together. It's been a while since we've been together, and regardless of how we feel about yesterday, the point is that it's always good for us to be in each other's company, and more importantly, to be in God's company. So welcome to each of you. Thank you for making time for this meeting tonight. I want to thank my colleagues, especially Teresa Penny, for her outstanding leadership in making everything related to our meeting on the 16th come together, including tonight's meeting and next Tuesday's meeting. For those of you who want to come twice, you are welcome both tonight and next Tuesday. Bear in mind that next Tuesday's meeting is a little different time. I'm so grateful that you got to meet Canon Mark Furlow, who's joined us just on October 1st as Canon to the Ordinary. Mark is going to say an opening prayer, and then he will tell us a short bit about himself, and then we'll get underway. Okay?
Well, we just prayed before you came on, Bishop Brown. But
I'm behind. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for praying.
Thank you. Absolutely. Glad to.
Teresa,
my name is...
Go ahead. Teresa,
my name is Mark Furlow. I'm coming to you from the Diocese of Southwestern Virginia. I've met many of you, particularly the clergy, on the past Clergy Day and Tri-Diocesan Clergy Conference. I'm most recently Canon to the Ordinary and Chief Operating Officer of Southwestern Virginia by way of Diocese of Lexington and also the Diocese of Virginia. And I'm glad to be here. I'm learning Maine is brand new to me. I've been here approximately 4 weeks. As I said to the clergy, so far, I think Waterville and Newcastle are as far north as I've been. So I look forward to making my way further north. But pleasure to be with you tonight, and we'll get to know each other better. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. We're really happy to have you here for things like saving us when we're not welcoming people to our meeting because we can't get the bishop in. We're going to start by walking through the agenda for convention, which we haven't really released yet. There'll be a copy of this for you when you arrive at convention on November 16th. And Susan has some slides for us. So have I stressed enough to you that you need to bring $10 in cash for parking? No one carries cash. I want to make sure that you have that on you. We're checking in at the Holiday Inn. It will be anybody who is qualified to vote. So certified delegates and canonically resident clergy and priests in charge of a Maine congregation, whether canonically resident or not. You will check in using a self-check-in iPad or computer or seeing somebody on staff. You will find your name in the list and you will check it off. We'll give you a voting card. You will go to the name tag table. There'll be a name tag for you. And if there isn't, you can make one yourself. This is also a time for you to get together with each other and have a little breakfast. If you require a big breakfast, probably eat ahead if you can. But we will have a continental breakfast and coffee. We'll have ministry tables. It looks like we have 13 different ministries that will be displayed. So be sure to find them. They won't be right as you walk in, but if you walk around the whole convention area, you'll see them. People that are guests, you will not have to check in. You will just go to the name tag station and find your information. This is a little bit what we have planned for the day. I think you can read through it yourself. We have a full morning because we're trying to condense everything in there. So lots of votes, covering the budget early, covering our contested elections, and we have a lot on the consent calendar, and Gordon Geyer is on the call and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Next slide. And then we do the exciting thing, which is we parade to the cathedral. We have staff that are going to keep you safe. And we're also going to advocate for the prevention of gun violence and our youth will lead us in that, and you'll hear more about it that day. You have a half hour to get there and get settled, and then we'll have probably over an hour long Eucharist, and then we will come back to the Holiday Inn. There are two choices. You can walk. It's very, very short. We've looked at advanced weather, but you know, that's not very helpful. And we also have some shuttles. They're passenger shuttles, so 14 passengers can get on at a time. And the Holiday Inn has one. We're hoping that's available at the time too. If not, that shuttle will make several trips for you. When you come back, there'll be a buffet set up where you can grab your lunch. You can take that back to your table and enjoy it there. And then we'll get started as soon as we can, reporting on the results of the ballot, voting on resolutions, and doing a little small group discussion and hearing more from our evangelism task force. We'll possibly have a second ballot depending on the results of the first. So that will be released, and we'll have our coffee break. And then we will have a couple presentations at the end and announce the final ballot results. We may need to repeat that ballot piece, and we're hoping to adjourn before 4:30, but I think everyone should depend on being there until 4:30.
Teresa?
Yeah, please.
I have a quick question. You've said this, but if you could just help those of us who may not have been to Portland in a long time or maybe ever, can you just help us understand a little bit about how far away the cathedral is from the hotel?
5-minute walk. And if you go to the website, Lorley, could you put the website link in there for the convention webpage? I have a little Google link that are the directions for walking, because walking is very different than driving. If you've been to Loring House at all, you know this. It's a lot of one ways. So driving takes a little bit longer than the walking, but yeah, it's 5 minutes. It's flat. It's not a difficult walk. You do cross a couple of roadways, and I figure there's a crowd of 250 of us. So we might want to have somebody sort of corralling that crowd. And that's why we recruited Emily Keniston for that job.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, and that's any questions about the agenda? No, okay. That's great. We'll go to Gordon Geyer.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Chancellor.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think. Yeah, I'm the Chancellor of the Diocese. I've met many of you. Great privilege over the years, and look forward, now that we're back in person, to a chance to meet more of you. The two things I need to talk to you about are the rules of order and the consent calendar. I'll try to make this as succinct as we can. The rules of order you'll be asked to approve early in our order of business when we assemble on Saturday. And every convention or parliamentary body needs a set of rules of order to guide their proceedings. And they're can be a little bit peculiar depending on the circumstances. And we have a couple of peculiarities here. They're not far out of the ordinary, but I want to draw attention to them. The big background, of course, though, is that we're governed by Robert's Rules of Order, which has been available in the English-speaking world for a long, long time, and is updated continually. In fact, most recently has been updated to deal with virtual conventions. That's a piece of business we need to adopt in the very near future for our own rules. So looking at the rules of order for Saturday morning, you'll be asked to approve. I'll go through them in order, skipping as quickly as I can the ones that are less, that don't need a lot of attention. The first one, however, is very important. This is how we do our voting. Some of you will remember a time within living memory when we did this with paper ballots. It was very time consuming. The ballots had to be marked by delegates, then had to be collected by the tellers and then manually counted and so on. Then we switched over to what I call clickers, handheld devices. And we're trying something new this time a little bit. I'm not going to begin to speak about the technical side of it because I would immediately be out of my depth. But it does allow us, as I understand it, to take advantage of the nearly universal practice of people having some kind of personal device, like a cell phone, smartphone, et cetera, But I would draw your attention, I'm in rule number 1, that for delegates who lack a personal device, this is the second sentence, alternative means will be provided. We didn't try to spell that out in the rules of order. I don't think that's specificity is appropriate at this level, but the managers of the convention do intend to make sure that no one is going to be thrown out there into the water that's way over their head. There will be something to make sure that all delegates do get to vote. I would say also, if you have any questions as we go along, please pipe up, but I won't be hurt if there are no questions. The second one rule is also, I think, worth drawing attention to. It's often the case that nominations from the floor in a parliamentary body like this are allowed, but the managers and designers of the convention have chosen this time, now that we're back together, not to allow nominations from the floor. They don't have the power ahead of time. Even the bishop himself doesn't have the power to prevent that, but he does have the power to direct us to ask you to adopt a rule of order preventing that. I think it's a really good idea not to have nominations from the floor unless absolutely necessary. The problem being that often the skill set that the job that you're voting for means there needs to be some advanced vetting for the person that would be considered, and nominations from the floor allow a very, very limited opportunity for that. We don't think we need nominations from the floor this time around to get the people that we want or that are appropriate to present to the convention. So that's what's behind that. Going back the last few years when we met virtually, it was essential not to have nominations from the floor. We thought that would just lead to possibly the horse getting completely out of the barn, a runaway convention, and a lot of complication. Worked very well. Rule number 3, we've had forever. When we're voting for an office, for the first 2 ballots, if we don't get a majority, well, first 2 times we try to find the person selected by a majority. But if there is no majority on ballot 1 or ballot 2, this is where you have multiple candidates for one office. Then on the 3rd ballot, just to move things along, whoever has the plurality, so whoever has the most votes. So on ballot number 1 for an office, you need 50.1%. Same in ballot number 2, 50.1%. But in ballot number 3, whoever has the most, it could be 40% or even 30% if there's a lot of candidates. This has always worked well for the diocese, and it actually happens very rarely. That's for all positions we're voting on, except for delegates to the Triennial General Convention. This is a special situation. And what we've put in Rule 4 is the procedure that we followed for a number of years. In fact, I simply don't remember a time when we didn't follow this in the Diocese of Maine. And that is, we have 8 positions we really need to have filled. We need 4 deputies. And by the way, when you're going to the General Convention, you're a deputy. When you're coming to the annual convention here in Maine, you're a delegate. What we need is 4 regular deputies, but we also need 4 alternates. There are lots of reasons to have those alternates. We really have to have somebody or several people lined up ready to step in, because there's quite a lead time between when we select at our level the deputies we want to send to the next general convention and when that general convention is actually held. Things happen, health issues arrive, personal plans change, and it's not at all infrequent that one of the regular deputies has to step aside and then one of the alternates has to step up. So this rule kind of speaks for itself. We simply rank all the people who are running to be a deputy, either as lay or as clerical, in order of the number of votes received. The top 4 become the regular deputies, and if there's no change, those are the people who will go. But if one of them drops out, then number 5 steps in. If 2 of the regular deputies drop out, then numbers 5 and 6 step in, and so on. Okay, moving on. We've always, number 5, I think I'll skip over. It's just good manners to identify yourself. And we ask that the chair be addressed as either Bishop or Bishop Brown. I think number 7 is important. All delegates are expected to be in attendance and to vote. No abstaining vote is allowed. You got to step up to it. That's the nature of this proceeding. You may not be sure, you may wish you could abstain or go to the sidelines on something, but that really isn't an option. This is kind of a duty we undertake as delegates. So you do need to vote. And just be prepared for that ahead of time. Fortunately, on the resolutions I've seen thus far, I don't see any major or huge controversies, and I don't think this has ever been a problem anyway, but it is a duty. Rule 8, that's just the canonical rule. If we're amending the canons themselves, we vote by orders. Normally we vote as a body of the whole, but there is this peculiar requirement, or particular requirement, not peculiar, that canonical changes require a vote by first the clerical order and then the lay order. Sidebar, if anyone ever wanted to amend the Constitution itself of our diocese, that's another one where there's a special requirement that an amendment to our Constitution has to be passed in its precise verbal form in year 1, and then in year 2 has to be passed again. In other words, it would have to pass our convention 2 years in a row before we really amend our Constitution, and that's a good idea too. That doesn't show up in our rules of order here, and I don't believe we have in front of us any resolutions to amend the Constitution at this point. Let's see, number 9, motion to cut off debate, call the question, sometimes called call the question, is in order, but not until each side has had 5 minutes to present its views, some discussion. This is to prevent one side precluding the other side from having an opportunity to expound its views. The problem with the motion to call a question is it's not debatable, and oftentimes people are tired of talking, and so they just vote it, and that squelches further debate. So I would just urge people to use that sparingly, but there are times when it's extremely appropriate. And we give the bishop himself the discretion to go ahead and call the question if 3 delegates have spoken on one side of a matter and nobody comes forward to speak on the other side. The theory is we've had enough discussion. We don't need more people saying what has already been said 3 times, but in slightly different ways. Good, fair process in Rule 11. Everyone no one can speak twice until everyone's had a chance to speak once, and we limit speaking to 5 minutes. We always, and I'm sure we'll repeat this Saturday morning, always urge people to be concise and speak right to the point, and then make your point, and then please take your seat again. And then we're not putting new resolutions, similar to no nominations from the floor. We basically kind of discourage new resolutions from the floor for the same general reason. There hasn't been a chance to think them through, but the floor is open for business. So yeah, I think we have to allow that, but only with a 2/3 majority approving the offering of a new resolution from the floor. And that's because everyone has had, at least in theory, and I think in reality, a lengthy time ahead of time to prepare and submit resolutions. So no one's really ousted of their rights here, but resolutions are possible from the floor with a 2/3 permissive vote ahead of time. And the last point is good and useful announcement of when the next convention will be. So those are the rules of order. I think they're different from the rules, somewhat from the special rules we had for the last 3 or 4 years ever since COVID, but they're back very much to the kind of rules that we had before COVID put us into the virtual territory. And if there are no questions, I will move on to the consent calendar, which is a time-saving device. we simply are going to ask you, once you're assembled, to approve the consent calendar. It's a way to save scarce convention time by taking off the floor and deciding all at once non-controversial items that don't really need discussion. It is subject to an objection. So if anybody doesn't want, or rather wants a discussion of something that's on the consent calendar, you have that right from the floor to say, I object. I want to see item number 6. In this case, that would be the nomination of the Reverend Shirley Bowen to the disciplinary board clergy member. I want to see that voted on by the floor, and the chair would rule on your objection. But usually the consent calendar goes through as a time-saving device, and you can read what's on that consent calendar. It's rather short this year. It's been longer in other years, but you approve the, instead of taking convention time to approve the agenda, let's just do it. The same thing with approving the minutes from the last convention. At one time, portions of those minutes would get read, and boy, talk about something that chews up time. When it comes to elections where there's an uncontested election and only one candidate, and everyone's had plenty of time to think about whether they want to run for that or nominate someone else on a timely basis, the feeling is, let's not use up convention time having votes on that or discussion. Let's just get it done in one fell swoop. And hence you see 1, 2, 3, 4 uncontested elections that would be disposed of with the single candidate for those offices being elected as part of the approval of the consent calendar. Whether the minutes of a parliamentary meeting have to be read or not is an interesting technical question. They usually aren't, but I think it's a good idea in the record to say we waive the reading of the minutes. They are available. They've been published. Anyone can consult them, but this makes it formal that we're waiving the reading of those minutes. And then at the end of conventions in years past, there would often be a pleasant but time-consuming interval when a whole lot of resolutions of courtesy would be read. They're always motivated by the very best of intentions, but they do take up time. And so the practice in recent years has been to not read them on the floor, but put them in the materials you have available. So you can see them, but we won't take up convention time reading them, assuming that the delegates on the floor approve the consent calendar as you have it. So that's really what I have to say about the rules of order and the consent calendar. I think they're in good shape and have been adapted, changed a little bit as we go back to the in-person mode for the first time, and I think since 2019. So Teresa, back to you.
Thank you, Gordon. That was great. I think you've set us up for success. Thank you for typing questions in the chat. Everybody will answer them as we're able. And next up, we have Lael Sorensen with our budget.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm wondering if, and I don't need to know, but I've recognized a lot of faces, which is always pleasant for me to do right before we gathered. But I assume that some of you are new delegates and have never been to Diocesan Convention. And so I sort of have a basic presentation for you all. I want to begin by saying that the budget itself, it's sort of line by line budget, along with a thing that's called a narrative budget. It's really kind of an explanatory bit, is available on the website and has been for several weeks. You can check it out at any time. But all right, so here's my brief, relatively brief presentation of our budget. Our goal, of course, is to present a balanced budget, right? That allows this diocese, its congregations, summer chapels, Camp Bishopwood, and other diocesan entities. That's a weird word, but I really mean things like St. Elizabeth's Food Pantry or Bridging the Gap or the Trinity Lewiston Center. These other entities, for all of them to be able to do the kinds of ministry that they feel called to do. so that the diocese can support and meet challenges that are faced by them, and to provide Bishop Brown with funding for staff, consultants, and volunteers who facilitate that. We have, on the finance side, we have longed always to provide the bishop with as fulsome a staff as he can. And as many of you will know, some of those positions are brand new. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our budget for 2025 is 2,152,337 smackers. That's a lot, actually. And I want to say a little bit about it's actually gone up, and it's gone up mostly for a couple of reasons. One is that the two most important forms of funding that we have for the diocesan budget have done well. The assessments are based on 2023, and that was in many ways the first year. And if you are in a congregation that is struggling, I know you and I see you, but really for the vast majority of congregations, 2023 was the first really good post-COVID year. And we based the 25 budget on the 2023 report of normal operating income as done in your parochial report of that year. COVID was essentially 20 and 21. We were sort of getting back on our feet, limping and sometimes robustly in 2022, but 2023 is the one that it was very clear that people were coming back to their congregations, in-person worship was happening, and many congregations were actually growing. And that meant normal operating income was up. That means assessments were up. Well, that's really good. The other big source of income, it's not the only source, but the other big source of income are returns on our investments. Just in the same way that congregations might have investments, so does the diocese with the trustees. And it's been a good market for invested income. And that means that our budget has gone up, appreciably from last year. Specific to this year of 2025, we'll be maintaining our assessment rate of 15%. There is a weird calculus. Many of you heard this, but if you haven't heard it, this is how it works. That assessment amount is dependent, that's a typo, dependent upon the 2023 normal operating income. I'll fix that, Teresa, by the way, and send you a new copy. Is dependent upon the 2023 normal operating income. And it's based on 5% of the first $10,000 of normal operating income, plus a percentage of the balance of the normal operating income, such that it equals 15%. That's how the assessment is calculated. And again, this is not in any way official, but I think about those two things, the 5% of the first 10,000 as a kind of, it's maybe a little crass, I don't know, it kind of like anteing up. Everybody has to ante up the same amount. And thereafter, there's a percentage of your normal operating income that recognizes that the operating income of different size parishes or different parishes of different wealth is going to vary. Anyway, that's how that is. And we're committed to that 15%. If I could have the next slide. Again, there are three sources, and I mentioned that, that constitute our income: assessments, endowments, and other things. There are 17 summer chapels that are not assessed, but who nevertheless are often enormously generous. There's also what we call miscellaneous income, but it's really how the trustees pay the financial officer. But there's a line item for miscellaneous income. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that of those three, assessments, endowments, and other, assessments are still the biggest chunk. As robust and bullish as the market has been, as important as our endowments are, it's really assessments that drive this budget. And so we begin with, what do we have? How much money do we have? That's how finance does it. We figure out, what is that total? What are the assessments? What is our returns on our investments? What are these other incomes? How did summer chapels do in 2023? And that's our base. And we then take that, we figure, okay, what can we spend it on? So unlike some congregations that have deficit budgets, the diocese really is balanced in the sense that we have an amount, and the goal at the end of the year is zero, that we have this money, we spend it all, and then next year we raise it again. So the question then is, we have this money from assessments, investments, and summer chapels and so forth. What do we spend it on? And that's we have these, in some ways, sort of beautiful and poetic, and in some ways not so helpful, ways of divvying it up. And here they are, enlightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, claiming our inheritance. And I call it Loringhouse staff, but only so I could keep the tree in the slide. I think it's now called administering the beloved community. Too many letters, folks. Anyway, so Loringhouse staff. I want to take a moment and go through each of these items, just so that you have a sense of the kinds of things that are covered by each of these areas. And if you look on your budget, and again, you don't have to have this in front of you, you can just listen to this report and check on it otherwise. But the first category is called, and that's the next slide, is enlightening our hearts. And on the budget itself, on page 1 of 9, underneath expenses, it'll say these resources support justice, outreach, and advocacy. And that's enlightening our hearts, just so that you know. And it includes things like the things that are listed here, our contributions to the Maine Council of Churches. It supports the commissions on justice and their various councils, racial justice, climate justice, Episcopal Peace Fellowship, and the Committee on Indian Relations. It includes our support of, I call the Mission Center grant reserves. But again, this is the stuff about St. Elizabeth's Food Pantry or Bridging the Gap, those kinds of things, what used to be called Jubilee Centers. It also supports domestic and international poverty grants. And again, this sort of robustness of our assessments and of the returns on investments has meant that those have been able to be, for 25, have increased considerably. Last year, each of those grants, domestic and international poverty, so congregations can apply for this for programs in your area, was only $5,000 a piece. But in 2025, we've been able to increase that to $10,000 for international poverty grants and $20,000 for domestic poverty grants. So, we've had a windfall. Good for us. The next category is called answering the call. And again, it will say on your budget, it'll say these resources support faith formation. And it includes such things as, youth ministry program, events, Camp Bishopswood. We were able to really significantly increase the amount of support we gave to Camp Bishopswood, again, because of our bigger pot this year. It includes support of the Christian Education Collaborative and adult formation. It includes, Emily Keniston, you're in there, your ability to corral us, you are in there somewhere, EFM and clergy formation. And clergy formation too has increased a lot in 22 and 23. And actually I can even go back to 19, 20, and 21. Clergy formation amounts were really small and were really tokens. One of the things that's happened under Bishop Brown is that clergy formation and support of clergy learning has really become much, much more active. We've brought in fabulous speakers, and I was so delighted to see the increase in the amount given for clergy formation. That was really lovely. The next category is called Knowing the Hope. Again, it'll say, I got it on your budget, it'll say these are resources. I'm reading my budget here now, to support congregations and clergy. And so if there's a transition, if your priest in charge or rector has retired, there are costs to bring in interims and to do consulting, and that's covered. The ordination process for deacons and priests, the Commission on Ministry, and strategic mission support equivalencies. I should probably say something a little bit about that. We support a variety of congregations who, through a program called SMS, Strategic Mission Support, and it began about over 10 years ago, and was designed to target congregations particularly hard hit by industries that were closing. So I think about the paper mills closing, congregations along the Route 2 corridor, where there was an Episcopal church, and there's a certain vitality and vibrancy in the church, but the communities, the population is leaving. And how do we support them? Could they support a priest? Perhaps not. SMS supports those congregations up to 1/3 of their priest in charge's salary. So that's what strategic mission support equivalencies is about. The next category is called claiming our inheritance. And again, this is the stuff that all has to do with belonging to the greater Episcopal Church. So it includes our own assessment. Dioceses are assessed at 15% too. We give a 15% of our monies to the church, to the greater church. We also support provincial synods. General Convention happens every 3 years, and rather than getting slammed with a big bill every 3 years, we put money away each year so that when General Convention comes along, and with it, the triennial Episcopal Youth Event, we have monies to support those events. It also supports council and standing committees and the diocesan audit. I want to say a quick word about the audit. For those of you who were here before, I mentioned last year that we have hired a firm to do a new firm to review the 2022 and 2023 diocesan books. And we had expected that the 2022 audit would be completed and we could report on that at convention. That's not going to happen. They are close, but they're not quite done. But we will be in touch. We will we will release that information when we have it. And after 22, they will go on to 23. So I just wanted you to know that there's a delay in that. I want to say also a quick word about an audit task force that has formed. And this is about a task force to help congregations do their own annual audits. It's part of our canons that every congregation be audited every year. As almost everybody who's ever been involved in the finance of a congregation knows, there are not really CPA firms that specialize in the nonprofits like churches. And even if when they exist, they are quite expensive. And so this task force is reviewing what is possible and how best to make internal reviews, if not formal audits, meet our goals for accountability and transparency that is so important. People who give monies to a church want to be assured that the monies they give go to the things that that people say it's going to go to, and that's what an audit or a review is about. The audit task force, and this is not formal, but the audit task force is, and I thought I should share it with you, is working. It's working vision, and this can change, so I'm not promising anything, but its working vision is that the diocese might be able to hire a firm that would review annually something like 5 congregations on a rotating basis. It means that, with 57 congregations, we all can get audited once every 10 years, 10 or 11 years by an external source. And that would be part of something that the diocese could do for us. If that can happen, we then would work with that firm to help us develop protocols to help congregations do internal reviews. So there's certain clarity about what constitutes good business practices. What are good controls? Again, this is in its relatively early stages, but I thought I should share, I don't know, the working model that we're working on, that's coming down the pike. Okay, so we have these things: enlightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, claiming our inheritance, and administering the beloved community, aka Loring House staff. And if you take a look at this chart, you'll see that the staff is over half of our budget. That's a lot, but it's not really all that different from a congregation. If you think about the budget of your congregation, most of the money is going to go for your priest in charge, musician, if you have one. And if you have a cleaning guy, that would be good too. And maybe if you're really big, you have a children's minister, but it goes for staff. That's what the money goes for. We have always wanted on the finance, and I'm speaking as finance, but really this is from Diocesan Council, has always wanted to be able to provide the bishop with the best staff that we can afford, the most fulsome and robust staff that we can afford. And I'm sure the bishop will tell you about all of these people, but Susan Axelrod and Amy Redfern on the communications wing, and Laura Lee Raymond, and Mark Furlow, our canon to the ordinary, Sherry Quinn. All of these people are relatively new. Mark, you're the most new. All of these people are relatively new. And they are filling in, and we are delighted, truly delighted that they are here. The one area I want to say that really could still use some hires is the finance end. And you'll see, if you really read the fine print, you will see on the staff page for the 2025 budget that the finance director is not named. There's no initial there, and it says new. This is George Cooper's sort of is subtle way of saying, okay, I'm not going to be staying on. We're going to need to hire someone, and we will need to hire someone. And so I want to take if I can, a moment to say something about George. George joined us a couple of years ago, and is this a real word? I think he's got perspicacity like you wouldn't believe. His ability to sort of stand on the edge of a jungle and say, okay, let's figure it out. And to go in and keep going in and figuring out how things work and how to create systems has been really, really extraordinary. And I'm so grateful for him. And I guess the other thing I want to share, because, maybe the people in Cape Elizabeth where he was a deacon know this, but I want to say he is a patient and pleasant colleague. I have so enjoyed working with George, and I suspect I speak for the entire finance team when I say we are so going to miss you, sir. We are so going to miss you. Anyway, this is sort of what the pie looks like if you look at all of these parts of our focuses and the staff. But if you look at the second one, I always do this for those of you who are old, you'll say, aha. But if you take those staff and you divvy up their jobs and what they focus on, this is really what it looks like. So Loring House expenses are not nothing. They're not nothing, but they are, the smallest wedge. And it includes things like the lights, putting the lights on and they keeping the heat on, and IT and postage and phone systems and so forth. Everybody else on the staff works to extend the mission and ministry of Jesus Christ in this place. They are here for you and for me. And they are really, their work fills out all of those things having to do with enlightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, claiming the inheritance. That's the end of my report. Are there questions? And I can't see anything, but okay, here we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if I think there was a question by Rob Late at one point. Rob, do you in fact have a question?
And does Gordon have his hand up?
Chancellor Guyer? All right. So, Lael, first of all, thank you for making us laugh. And second of all, seriously, thank you so much for saying those things about George Cooper. Everything you said is really true. And we will have other chances besides tonight to praise and thank George Cooper. Friends, I wonder if there are questions about this budget presentation. Anything is possible, and Lael has great capacity, as do other people here in this room, to make sure that you have what you need to be able to vote on and speak to this budget, both on the 16th and especially after the 16th, assuming that we pass it so that you can communicate it to the people whom you serve in your local context. Questions or comments? And some of us need time to absorb information, and we might finish this meeting and think, oh, I really wished I had asked that. So we will make sure that you have contact emails to write to Lael, to connect directly with George, and also with Julian Sheffield, who's our treasurer. Really, any one of them can answer whatever question might come up. Well, before we move on, is there anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so. I think we're done.
Teresa, I'm turning things back to you.
So everyone, thank you for your questions in the chat again. It helps me figure out what I need to say about the voting procedure tonight. So Susan is gonna, well, we won't share that ballot yet. As we said, we're moving away from the devices we used at in-person conventions, for anyone who remembers that. And we're going to just use an online form. It'll just be the contested elections. So it'll be general convention lay, general convention clergy, standing committee clergy, and another clergy disciplinary board seat. You will pick 4 out of 8 clergy nominees. You will pick 4 out of 9 clergy nominees. You will pick 1 in each of the other categories because there's only 2. There's only 2 running. There will be instructions when the polls will open. You will have a half hour to do so on your own device, on the device of someone at your table, at a device in the hall. We'll have some iPads and some laptops, and you can do so there if you don't have something to bring with you. So the voting is not based on, yes, you only have 1 ballot, but you will put in your email address, and only 1 email address will be accepted by that form. So it has to be unique. So you can just refresh, share your phone, and another person could use it to vote that is a delegate. The form itself won't be released until that time when we say we're going to release it. It will be on a page of our website that is password protected. And so that's part of what you'll be receiving when you come and you register as a voter. You'll have that QR code to the web page and the code to get in. Let's see, we'll tally those at 11:30 when everyone starts to move, or 11 when everyone starts to move to the cathedral. We'll do the tallying. We have a team of tellers that are non-voters. So we have Wendy Capera, who does our database work here in the diocese. We have Matt Dunlap, former Secretary of State, and we have Michael Douglas from Camp Bishopswood. So they'll do all the tallying stuff, and I will stay behind and see if we need another ballot, and then join you for Eucharist. When we come back, we'll announce any results And we'll tell you if there's going to be another ballot, and then it'll be the same procedure again.
Teresa?
Yes.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I'm going to ask a question, and I see that Leo Cook has asked a similar question. I know the answer, but I think it'd be helpful for all of us to hear you give us the answer. When we go to vote and we register our email, do we have to have a particular email that you know about, or can we use any email that we own?
It will be any email. It just can't be a duplicate email. You can't
Thank
use someone else's email address.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So could you put up that ballot for me, Susan? And in the meantime, I'm going to put the email addresses I know for finance in the chat. So treasurer and George Cooper for any questions you might have about the budget. So yeah, so you will also get a copy of this. Once you hit submit, there will be a thank you message on the screen, and then you'll get a copy in your own email of what you voted. So you will see it. I think the most important thing is unique email address. And when you scroll down to the part that says General Convention, Clergy Deputy, you need to choose 4. Don't choose more than 4, or that ballot is invalid and we have to throw it out. So that would be the only thing. Just make sure you vote for 4. These are not the real nominees, as you can see. And if you're looking for information about the nominees and their bios, you can find that on the website too. It's in the Preconvention Journal, and Laura Lee can share a link to that nomination booklet in the chat. So you can read up long before you have this in front of you.
Thank you, Teresa. William, I want to answer your question from St. John's in Bangor, which pertains to what Teresa just told us. In fact, nominees will not be speaking or introducing themselves. The way for those of us who are voting to know about each person is to read about them in the information that we are providing.
Yeah, that is correct. Is there anything else I'm missing? I'm going to call on Canon Furlow to sort of help me out here. Am I missing anything about this voting process?
No, and
Okay.
it simplifies some things, and it's actually saves a good bit of money to do it this way. So, and it uses some new tech, which is good.
Yeah, I think this will work well for us, and we'll try to make it as simple for everybody as we can. Explain this all again at convention, and have all the instructions also on the ballot and people to help you with it. So that's all for that. Next up is the resolutions. We have 3 in front of us, and the Reverend Tracy Schaefer, the chair of the Resolutions Committee, will tell us a little bit more about that.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Teresa?
I can, yes.
Okay, technical issues resolved. Well, folks, we've had another year of work at the committee levels, and those committees are bringing up 3 resolutions to our attention this year. 2 deal with compensation, 1 for lay, 1 for clergy. And then the 3rd resolution is a continuation to continue the work that was approved at last year's resolution regarding evaluating and discussing and learning more on diocesan investments and our approach and how that aligns with social justice issues that we're on record of supporting. So let me ask if anybody from the compensation committee has joined. If not, I can recap on these 2. Anybody joined that wants to speak? Okay. What you'll notice in your package is Ryan Males is once again representing the committee before the convention this year again for these 2 resolutions. what you will find also is if you happen to be a delegate last year, is there's literally no change in the terms or conditions or amounts of the minimum lay compensation resolution, resolution number 1, and the clergy resolution number 2. We do offer these every year as part of our canonical requirements. But in essence, when we look at resolution number 1, establishing a floor for minimum lay compensation that needs to be offered for people working more than 250 hours annually by any congregation, it remains $16 per hour. Now, the way your resolution is laid out is the first page that says resolved, and then the language right after that is what you are voting on. When we get to convention, there is a supplementary page talking about a brief explanation. That's important to review and read and ask any questions you have around that. It is more of the background that the committee wants us to know as people voting on these matters. So this one was particularly well documented. Ryan and team do a wonderful job with this. And you'll see there that in addition to the $16 floor, they're suggesting that we consider the new COLA that has come out by the Social Security Administration at 2.5% for 2025. That's gone down a little because interest rates have gone down, and cost of inflation, cost of living has gone down. Submission questionnaire, you'll see that in all of these resolutions. Teresa Penny and the committee formed last year put questionnaires together so that when you're online submitting your resolution, you're answering standard questions. And so you can look at those as well. And in a minute, I'll let you know who is on the committee. But does anyone have a question on resolution number 1, minimum lay compensation? Fairly straightforward. Seeing none, let's step on to resolution number 2. The companion to this for vestries. It is 2025 clergy compensation. Again, no factual changes here year over year. Their minimum total clergy compensation for a newly called full-time presbyter. The floor on that is $64,000 and remains. You'll see this resolution for those who are new to reading this, that there's also supply clergy cared for in this as far as the minimum amount required to offer to have supply come and support the congregation. Talks also about expenses, of course, too. And then an important part for us starts at line 17 when we're working on talking about employing or calling part-time presbyters. So again, no changes here, but it helps establish what we should be anticipating in terms of scheduling and activities provided, a half-time, 2 Sundays and 2 work weeks, which I personally equate to 80 hours, 2 40-hour weeks, and quarter time, 1 Sunday and 1 work week. Nice explanations again follow that. And again, these are recommendations and guideposts for us. And it does speak in there that if you have a particularly experienced person that you're calling, or people with special skills, you have special needs, obviously local opportunity to add to that compensation level, and talk with Suzanne Roberts about that when we're calling someone. Any questions on clergy compensation for 2023? I do see a small, whoops, it disappeared, but I think Leo was asking a question about supply. And you have kind of a unique situation, Leo, in the MDI partnership churches, because normally you don't see supply in a continuing agreement role like we have currently out on the island. So if you have more questions on that, I'd invite you to send an email to Ryan or send me an email and I can direct that to you. Anybody want to comment on that response I just gave?
I want to say how wonderful you are, Deacon Schaefer. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, sir. It's a hard act to follow Lyle in the works that she does every year. My gosh. And the committee, obviously. Okay, so the next resolution was brought to us last year as a brand new resolution. If you were with us in 2024, it was resolution number 1, investment of diocesan funds. And for those of us who are new this year to convention, when you go out online and you pull up this resolution, you're going to see a link to last year's resolution. And that's important because it'll give you a background of why the committee that created this resolution wanted us to approve it in the first place. And as I said at the top of the presentation here, this is basically taking a look and taking some time to just have more conversation, more discussion around how do we invest our diocesan funds, which is the responsibility of a special commission that we elect as convention delegates. How do we look at those, how those investments are committed, and are those aligned? How closely are they aligned with our social policy? Things like climate care, for example, and equity and inequality issues that we know we're very dedicated toward, et cetera, our whole portfolio of concerns. So last year, in a vote of 145 to 17, according to my notes, this resolution went forward and the team was given an entire year to compile themselves and work on this matter and want to continue this work. Now, Elaine Hughes might still be on this call, and I don't know if she wants to add anything. She is one of the contact people on our resolution material here.
Sure. Hi, Tracy. Oh, hi, Tracy. If you don't want to speak, Elaine, that's fine. I have given full instruction.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Maybe I'll just say that we have worked over the year really hard together, and just recognize that this was an ask that we took seriously and joyfully, but we're not done. And so this resolution requests that the body at the convention say keep working. It will not be comprised of the same people as we're working this year together. Maybe Teresa, you could speak a little bit to what the new body will look like.
Yeah, it will look even better. Now, I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but I think we'll probably send out a similar invitation to people that want to do this, and everybody who was on it will be invited back to. Bishop may make some appointments, and we'll just see where that goes. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, Elaine and Teresa, thank you for that. Any of us working on committees certainly understands that a brand new effort to just take time to call the committee forward takes time, and then to just develop scope of study and talking with the subject matter experts and establishing those relationships, it all takes time. And because the way the resolution was written last year is why we're bringing it forward for continuation. Normally, in the course of our work in congregations or other organizations, we just keep moving forward. But this does need to be brought up for an affirmative vote if we're going to continue to look at that matter. Briefly, I want to thank the people that offered to serve on the resolution committee. You could reach out to any of these folks for further information on this type of work. We're blessed to have Teresa Pinney heading us up in terms of staff support and staff liaison. She's been invaluable. Marge Kilkenny, year-over-year subject matter expert in legislative matters. Betsy York and Tom Newson, who have offered to help us last year and this year. One thing the committee would love to hear more from you about, and you can talk to Teresa, send her a note, or send a note to myself, is are we at a point where we need to offer some resolutions training out there to the diocese? We offered that 2 years ago. I think other than the committee, there was one person on the call. So we have done a lot to make the material very available online. But if we're at a point where you'd like a forum on that and to ask questions and understand why do we do resolutions, what kind of subject matter should we be looking at or could we possibly look at, etc., we'd be happy to put something together and offer that after the first of the year. So unless there's any other questions, I will turn it back to you, Teresa.
Yeah, Stephanie Batterman has a question.
Okay. Yes.
Stephanie?
Accident, I'm sorry.
Peg
Okay.
Hoffman, we see you.
I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for Tracy or Elaine to flesh out a little bit about what the committee about investments has been mostly focused on. I mean, I heard her say something kind of fast and quick. I think that would help me as far as voting to continue it.
Okay.
Thank you, Peg. That's a great question, and I can help you with that. Tom Van Buren, are you with us this evening? I don't see Tom. So let
Yes,
me.
I am.
Great. Tom, would you like to respond to Peg?
Okay. I was looking actually through the convention materials because we did develop a report that Matt Dunlap shepherded through, and I thought at one point he may be on the next town hall to speak to it further. He has a more granular view of the whole process, but we met about 6 times altogether, more or less monthly from the spring, and did work. We looked at the possibility of more specific resolution points, but didn't have full consensus on them. But one of our co-chairs, Carlos Mello, was a trustee. He shared with us, lots of detail about the process, about the specific investments, about the managers, about the criteria that they use. We reviewed the special law, which is the law that formed the trustees in the first place in 1849, and I think it was last amended in 1990 something. And we looked at related materials from the wider church and its finance committee, and the criteria that they imply, including no buy lists. And we looked at some comparables from other churches and other dioceses. But there's a tremendous amount to learn. And it's a very rapidly changing landscape. I mean, the term ESG, which is one way of talking about an attempt at standards for responsible, socially and environmentally and governmentally responsible investments, that category, well, aside from being challenged politically in many places, also is used and abused widely. And so we trying to be more specific about our terms we use. And as Carlos pointed out, it's very difficult for the trustees to do the work they do in this kind of landscape. But by the end of it, we resolved that there's plenty to still work on, but to come to a point of actually making a recommendation to the diocese or to the convention, it will take more effort and engagement of other representatives, including the diocesan council, who ultimately would be involved certainly in the administration of any particular outcome.
Tom, you raised an excellent point in that because this was a resolution last year, it is required that we have an update of sorts to the delegates this year, and that has been provided, and Teresa will make that available in time for the floor at convention. I do want to point out to the folks that haven't had a chance to dip into last year's resolution that, to Tom's point, the outcome of this was to report to this year's diocesan convention in 2024 its conclusions and recommendations, including any appropriate resolutions for consideration. And that's the point that they need and want more time, because again, much study's been done, but with time ticking and wanting to get it right, make sure all voices are heard, need more time to come up with those points to consider next year. The other last point I would make to my co-delegates is that one impressive point of this committee that we do not often see when resolutions come in is when they put forward this resolution last year. Thomas chair and the committee were earnest in going to all of the other diocesan committees on social justice. And you will see in backup material, endorsements from each of those committees, such as the Peace Fellowship, Creative Care, Indian or Indigenous Relations, and Racial Justice. So this is important work. And when you have that kind of support behind this special committee or this special commission looking at this, knowing too that there's a huge partnership between those called to invest and those of us who want to hear more about how we're doing that, my hope is that we'll give them the time they're looking for. Just a personal note, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And Tom, thank you for your very helpful response. Peg Hoffman, I want to acknowledge and thank you for asking this question. And for all of you, please refer to the chat in this meeting. There is a link to the report that this commission provided to all of us about the work that they have done this past year. And so, especially as you get ready to vote on the 16th, I think this report that they have given to us will be very helpful to each of you.
Thank you very much for the answers to my question. It certainly seems that my sense from being a delegate last time and hearing that there were these concerns is that it's a sensitive topic. I also understand from the information I've just been given that it's very complex. And so I want to just express my appreciation to the committee for all the time they've spent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I was going to do a little bit about the open positions and the nominations and refer you all to that again, but we're coming up against time, and we will put a link to the bios in the chat, and you can find all the open positions on the website, and that's episcopalmaine.org/convention. That's all you need to type in and you'll find it all. And we will turn it over to the Liturgical Commission. The Reverend George Sheets is going to close us with some worship. Please mute yourselves unless he calls on you to be a responder. And Susan will put up some slides.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. I would like for someone, whoever the Spirit moves, to be my responder and reader. Someone like to do that?
I'll do it. This is Matt Bear Fowler.
All right, Matt, you've got it. So you have the role of responder, and then you'll read the scripture when we come to that part.
Okay,
Thank you. So we'll begin with
certainly.
a moment of silence, and then we'll enter into our worship. Oh God, be not far from us.
Come quickly to help us, O God.
Light of the world, in grace and beauty, mirror of God's eternal face, transparent flame of love's free duty, you bring salvation to our race. And now, as we see the lights of evening, we raise our voice in hymns of praise. Worthy are you of endless blessing, sun of our night, lamp of our days.
Am I supposed to read this?
Yes.
Okay. A reading from the book of Acts, chapter 1. The former account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began both to do and teach, until the day in which he was taken up, after he, through the Holy Spirit, had given commandments to the apostles whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive, after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them during 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. And being assembled together with them, he commanded them not to depart from Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which, he said, you have heard from me, for John truly baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. Now, when he had spoken these things, while they watched, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Lord Jesus, stay with us, for evening is at hand and the day is past. Be our companion in the way. Kindle our hearts, awaken hope, so that we may know you as you are revealed in Scripture and the breaking of bread. Grant this for the sake of your love. Amen. Bishop Brown, I'll hand it to you for the final blessing.
Thank you so much. Christ's blessing be with you. Christ's peace be with you. The Spirit's outpouring be with you now and always. Amen. Thank you, George, and your colleagues on the Liturgical Commission. Thank you so much to my colleagues on the diocesan staff, to the finance team, especially to you, Lael, for your work tonight, Tracy, for your ongoing leadership in helping us be organized with resolutions, and to each of you for taking time tonight for asking questions. You can come again on Tuesday. I think that we have answered most of your questions in the chat, but if we haven't, or if things come to you, you know how to reach us, I hope. First initial of our first name plus our surname at episcopalmaine.org, and you can email each of us. I want to just say one more word about the question about the disciplinary board, and that I think it was answered, but we have a couple of minutes. So I'd like to do a little teaching with us tonight about how we deal with and staff matters that come before us that allege misconduct of some kind, that require a disciplinary board to work to make recommendations in the face of clergy misconduct. We, along with several other dioceses who are small or who are geographically spread out, have a disciplinary board that spans across the 3 northern New England dioceses. As Teresa responded in the chat, this is a long-standing, I think over a decade, that we have worked with the Diocese of Vermont and New Hampshire to have one disciplinary board. So there are members whom we elect from Maine, and then each year there are people who are elected in the Diocese of New Hampshire, and each year there are people who are elected in the Diocese of Vermont. From among those people, they elect themselves a chair, and each diocese has intake officers, volunteers who are on call and ready to receive complaints related to behavior on the part of ordained persons. And so when those complaints are received, the intake officer makes a decision. And if the decision is for that matter to be considered by another group of people, namely members of the disciplinary board, then they meet. And so it's important for us to do this work every year and to make sure that we are doing our part to elect people to the disciplinary board that will serve all 3 dioceses. We are blessed in northern New England with a very small caseload when it comes to clergy disciplinary matters. And so it is not a body that works very often. In fact, I don't think the disciplinary board has met in calendar year 2024. And in 2023, I think it met 3 times. So it's an as-needed body, but we elect people from Maine to serve on it throughout the northern New England region. That was a lot of words from me, but I wanted all of us to have a clearer sense of how this works in this neck of the woods, which is different. If you have served in other dioceses that are larger, it's very often a single diocese who populates one clergy disciplinary board. I think it's almost 7 o'clock. There's 2 minutes left, and I see several deacons, including Gail Chandler. Will you dismiss us, please?
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good night from Portland.
Night from Portland.
Good night from Bangor.
Good night
Good
from
night from
Southwest Harbor.
Kennebunk.
Good night from Portland.
Good night from Bath.
Good night from
Lewiston.
Good night from Rockland.
Night from Raymond.
Night from Old Town.
Good night from Saco.
Good night from Wilton.
Good night from Calais.
Good night from Ellsworth.
Good night from Machias.
Good night from Blue Hill.
Good night from Hancock. Thank you.
Lots of love to you all.